What happens when the world's most unpredictable billionaire sits across from late-night television's sharpest host? It only took 37 seconds for Elon Musk to turn what should have been a friendly chat into the most explosive meltdown ever caught on live television. This is the story of how one man's ego destroyed his reputation in front of millions of viewers. The Late Show studio buzzed with its usual energy. Cameras rolled, audience members settled into their seats, and Stephen Colbert adjusted his tie one final time. Tonight's guest was supposed to be television gold, the SpaceX founder, the Tesla CEO, the man who bought Twitter and renamed it something unpronounceable. Everyone expected fireworks, but nobody expected what actually happened. Colbert had done his homework. He always did. His research team had prepared talking points about electric vehicles, space exploration, and social media changes. They had crafted questions designed to be challenging but fair, probing but respectful. What they hadn't prepared for was dealing with someone who seemed determined to burn every bridge in sight. The guest walked onto the stage with that familiar swagger. Expensive suit, confident smile, the kind of presence that commanded attention. The audience applauded politely as he settled into the guest chair, that iconic red leather seat that had hosted presidents, movie stars, and Nobel Prize winners. Little did anyone know they were about to witness career suicide in real time. Colbert opened with his trademark warmth. "Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here tonight." "Thanks for having me, Stephen. Though I have to say, your ratings could use some work." The host's smile never wavered, but something flickered in his eyes. A warning sign that only the most experienced television watchers would have caught. Colbert had dealt with difficult guests before, but this felt different. This felt personal from the very first exchange. "Well, we do our best to entertain people," Colbert replied smoothly. "Speaking of entertainment, let's talk about your companies. Tesla has been making headlines lately with some production challenges." "Production challenges?" The guest leaned back in his chair, a smirk spreading across his face. "That's rich, coming from someone who produces the same tired jokes every night. At least my cars actually work." The audience fell silent. This wasn't playful banter. This wasn't the usual back and forth between host and guest. This was something else entirely. Colbert maintained his professional composure, but the temperature in the studio had definitely dropped a few degrees. "I think our viewers might disagree about the jokes," Colbert said with a slight chuckle, trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground. "But let's focus on you. Your space program has been incredibly ambitious. What drives that passion for exploration? What drives it?" The guest's voice took on a condescending tone. "Vision, Stephen. Something most people in this business seem to lack. You sit behind this desk every night making jokes about people who are actually trying to change the world. It's pretty pathetic when you think about it." The camera caught Colbert's jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. His years of experience dealing with politicians and celebrities had taught him how to handle almost any situation, but this level of unprovoked hostility was testing even his legendary patience. "I think there's value in both changing the world and helping people laugh about it," Colbert responded diplomatically. "Comedy has always been a way for people to process difficult times." "Process difficult times?" The guest let out a harsh laugh. "Your show is just establishment propaganda dressed up with punchlines. You're not helping anyone process anything. You're just another corporate mouthpiece telling people what to think." The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't what they had signed up for. They came expecting entertainment, maybe some interesting insights about technology and business. Instead, they were watching their beloved host get attacked by someone who seemed to have no sense of basic courtesy or professional behavior. Colbert took a deep breath. Decades of experience had taught him that sometimes the best response to aggression was grace under pressure. "I think we might have to agree to disagree on that one. Let's talk about something more positive. Your work with renewable energy has been groundbreaking." "Finally, a decent question," the guest said with mock surprise. "Though I'm sure you'll find a way to screw this up too." That was the moment. 37 seconds into what should have been a normal interview, everyone in that studio knew they were witnessing something unprecedented. The host's professionalism was being tested by someone who seemed determined to be as unpleasant as possible, and the audience could feel the tension building, like a storm about to break. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every uncomfortable moment, every forced smile, every sign that this interview was heading toward disaster. What happened next would be talked about for years to come. But in that moment, all anyone could do was watch and wait for the inevitable explosion. Colbert's patience was legendary in the industry, but even legends have their limits. The host straightened in his chair, his professional mask still intact but showing the first hairline cracks. You know what? Let's try a different approach. I'm curious about your recent social media activity. Some of your posts have been pretty controversial. The guest's eyes lit up with malicious glee. Controversial to who? To your little bubble of viewers who can't handle different opinions? I say what needs to be said. Unlike certain talk show hosts who just parrot whatever their corporate overlords tell them to, the audience was dead silent now. This wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was excruciating. People were literally cringing in their seats, watching their favorite late-night host get verbally assaulted by someone who seemed to think basic human decency was optional. I think most reasonable people would agree that civil discourse is important, Colbert said, his voice still steady, but with an edge that hadn't been there before. Especially when you have a platform that reaches millions of people. Civil discourse? The guest leaned forward aggressively. You mean like when you spend every monologue attacking people you disagree with? You're the last person who should be lecturing anyone about civility, Stephen. Your entire career is built on being mean to people for laughs. Colbert's composure finally showed real strain. His hands gripped the edge of his desk just a little tighter. There's a difference between political satire and personal attacks. Comedy has always been about punching up, not punching down. Punching up? The guest's voice rose with incredulous anger. You think you're punching up? You're a millionaire sitting in a fancy studio, making jokes about people who are actually building the future. I've created more jobs and advanced more technology than you ever will, and you have the nerve to sit there and judge me? The production crew behind the cameras exchanged worried glances. This was spiraling out of control fast. The director was frantically gesturing, trying to figure out how to salvage what was supposed to be a standard celebrity interview. But there was no playbook for this level of hostility from a guest. Colbert took another deep breath, clearly drawing on every ounce of his professional training. I think there might be some misunderstanding here. I'm not trying to attack you personally. I'm just asking questions that I think our viewers would want answered. Your viewers? The guest said, with contempt dripping from every word. You mean the people who tune in every night to have their biases confirmed? The same people who think comedy means clapping when someone says something they already agree with? Those viewers? Something shifted in Colbert's expression. The mask of professional courtesy was starting to slip, revealing the sharp intelligence and fierce integrity that had made him one of the most respected figures in television. You know what? I think those viewers deserve better than this conversation we're having right now. Better? The guest laughed harshly. They deserve better than you, Stephen. This whole show is just intellectual masturbation for people who want to feel superior without actually doing anything meaningful with their lives. The audience gasped audibly. Several people in the front row looked genuinely shocked. This had crossed every line of basic human decency. The guest wasn't just being rude anymore. He was being cruel, attacking not just the host, but everyone who had paid money to be there that night. Colbert's famous quick wit finally kicked into high gear. Well, I suppose we all have different definitions of meaningful. Some people build rockets. Some people try to bring a little joy into the world. Both seem pretty worthwhile to me. Joy? The guest's voice was full of mocking disdain. Is that what you call this? Sitting here night after night, making the same predictable jokes about the same predictable targets? There's nothing joyful about what you do, Stephen. It's just bitter, corporate-approved cynicism dressed up as entertainment. The host's eyes flashed with something dangerous. For just a moment, the carefully constructed television persona fell away, revealing the brilliant, passionate person underneath. You know what's bitter? Coming on someone's show and spending the entire time insulting them and their audience. That's not edgy or revolutionary, it's just bad manners. Bad manners? The guest stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward. You want to talk about bad manners? How about spending years making jokes at other people's expense and then acting all hurt when someone calls you out on it? The studio fell into complete silence. Even the crew members seemed frozen, unsure whether to keep filming or cut to commercial. This was uncharted territory, a complete breakdown of the basic social contract that makes television interviews possible. Colbert remained seated, but his entire posture had changed. The friendly host was gone, replaced by someone who had clearly reached the end of his patience. I think maybe we should take a break and let everyone cool down. Cool down? The guest's voice rose to near shouting. I'm just getting started, Stephen. You've been hiding behind this nice guy act for so long, people have forgotten what a fraud you really are. That was the breaking point. Stephen Colbert, the man who had interviewed presidents with grace, who had navigated the most contentious political moments with wisdom and humor, who had built a career on finding common ground even with people he disagreed with, finally reached his limit. Colbert stood up slowly, deliberately. His movement was controlled, professional, but there was steel in his voice when he spoke. You know what? I think we're done here. Done? The guest let out a bitter laugh. We're just getting to the good part. This is the most honest conversation you've had on this show in years. Honest? Colbert's voice carried a quiet intensity that was somehow more powerful than shouting. There's nothing honest about coming into someone's house and insulting them and their guests. That's not honesty. That's just cruelty. The guest stepped closer to the desk, his face flushed with anger. Your house? This isn't your house, Stephen. This is a corporate soundstage where you perform your little puppet show for the masses. Don't pretend this is something noble. Something remarkable happened then. Instead of responding with anger, Colbert's expression softened with what could only be described as pity. You know what the saddest part is? You actually believe what you're saying. You think being mean makes you honest, and being cruel makes you brave. Don't you dare talk down to me, the guest snarled, pointing an accusing finger at the host. I've accomplished more in 5 years than you'll accomplish in your entire pathetic career. Colbert shook his head slowly. Accomplishment isn't just about what you build. It's about how you treat people while you're building it. And right now, in front of all these people who came here to have a good time, you're showing everyone exactly who you really are. The audience began to murmur among themselves. Some people were actually starting to leave their seats, uncomfortable with the level of hostility they were witnessing. The guest seemed oblivious to the fact that he was losing the room, that his behavior was turning everyone against him. Who I really am, the guest's voice cracked with rage. I'm someone who doesn't pretend to be something I'm not. I'm someone who speaks the truth instead of hiding behind jokes and false sincerity. The truth? Colbert's voice grew stronger, more confident. Here's some truth for you. You came here tonight as a guest, and you've spent the entire time being disrespectful to me, to my staff, and to these wonderful people who paid their hard-earned money to be here. That's not truth. That's just selfishness. The guest looked around the studio as if seeing it for the first time. The camera operators were staring at him with obvious disgust. The audience members who hadn't left were shaking their heads in disappointment. Even the security guards near the exits had moved closer, sensing that this situation might require their intervention. You think you're so much better than me, the guest said, but his voice had lost some of its earlier venom. The reality of how badly he was coming across was finally starting to penetrate his bubble of self-righteousness. Colbert's response was delivered with the calm authority of someone who had moral clarity on his side. I don't think I'm better than anyone, but I do think everyone deserves to be treated with basic human dignity, and that includes the people you've been insulting for the past 20 minutes. Basic human dignity? The guest made one last desperate attempt at defiance. That's rich coming from someone who makes a living mocking people on national television. There's a difference, Colbert said firmly, between commenting on public figures and their actions, and personally attacking someone who invited you into their workplace. What you're doing right now isn't commentary, it's just being a bully. The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Bully. It was such a simple word, but it captured exactly what everyone in that studio was thinking. This wasn't a debate between equals. This wasn't even a heated disagreement between professionals. This was one person using their platform to be unnecessarily cruel to someone who had shown them nothing but hospitality. The guest's face went through a series of emotions: anger, confusion, and finally something that might have been recognition of how far he had fallen. But instead of apologizing, instead of trying to salvage the situation with some grace, he doubled down one final time. You know what, Stephen? This whole thing is beneath me anyway. Your show, your audience, this entire pathetic charade. I don't need this. Colbert nodded calmly. You're absolutely right. You don't need this, and we don't need this behavior. Security will show you out. The words were spoken quietly, without drama or flourish, but they carried the weight of absolute finality. 2 security guards stepped forward, not aggressively, but with the clear intention of escorting the guest from the building. For a moment, the guest stood frozen, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. Then reality crashed over him like a cold wave. He had just been kicked off one of the most popular talk shows on television in front of a live audience, with cameras rolling. There would be no editing this out, no chance to explain it away later. This is ridiculous, he muttered. But the fight had gone out of him. He walked toward the exit with as much dignity as he could muster, which wasn't much considering the circumstances. As the studio doors closed behind him, Colbert turned back to his audience. The transformation was immediate and remarkable. The steel melted away, replaced by the warm, genuine person his viewers had come to love. Well, he said with a rueful smile, that certainly wasn't in the script. The audience erupted in applause, not the polite clapping of a television taping, but the genuine, heartfelt appreciation of people who had just witnessed someone stand up for basic decency under pressure. They weren't just applauding the host, They were applauding the idea that some things were more important than ratings or controversy. Colbert raised his hand to quiet the crowd. I think we can all agree that respect and kindness should never go out of style, no matter how successful someone becomes. The applause began again, louder this time, as if the audience needed to cleanse the studio of the negativity that had just occurred. And with that simple statement, Stephen Colbert had turned what could have been a disaster into a lesson about dignity, respect, and the courage to stand up for what's right.